Uh-huh. Our participants tonight are Julie Coleman from Chanhassen and Tom Funk from Victoria.
Joe?
Yes.
We can't hear you back here. Can you-
See, it's not on.
Okay, I think, are you maxed out?
No.
All right, I'll speak louder for you. So let's show our appreciation to the two candidates for their willingness to step up and to serve Carver County.
All right, here.
So before we go any further, let's rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Sandra, where are you?
Let's pray. Father God, we just thank you for this time that we could have together with you in a free country, Father God. We thank you for the two candidates that have stepped forward to the debate for their both ideas on both sides of whatever it is. And Father God, we thank you for each person that has come. We thank you for the safety that you gave them to get here. We thank you for the safety to get them home. And Father God, we thank you for the meal that we had here. We thank you for that food. Bless it and nourish it for our body's needs, Father God. We thank you for all the workers that have come to put this whole event together. And Father God, we thank you for being here to listen to what each person has to say, and you make your own decision from there. Thank you for this time, Father God. For it's in Jesus' name we do pray. Amen and amen.
Amen.
Do we have any active or retired military? Would you please stand? I think we have a few politicians that showed up tonight. I see Greg Bull came in. Greg, would you just stand and give everybody a wave? Where are you? Have they raised any taxes yet?
Not yet, but they're already planned.
Yep.
Commissioner Workman is here. Tom, would you stand? Councilman Tom Gregory, I saw you earlier. There he is, right there. And I think that's it, unless I missed somebody, they snuck in, so raise your hand. Okay, thank you. An event like this doesn't happen just by accident, it takes a lot of planning. And behind the scenes, members of the event subcommittee have spent quite a bit of time organizing. And these are volunteer members of the Carver County Executive Committee who've done this. So when I call your name, would you please stand to be recognized? Carolyn Herneman. Vince Bodette. Kelly Peterson. Becky Lonis. Becky Lonis. Joni Demeter. Right. John Kunitz, our timekeeper. And the chair of the events committee, Vicki Ernst. A lot of what we do here is we communicate to our members, our contact with people, our delegates, alternates, etc. And without social media, Facebook, websites, and our extensive email list, there's a lot that would be going on you wouldn't have any idea. So we are constantly looking at our lists and updating things and modifying them as they see fit, so you can get as much up-to-date information as possible. The person responsible for that is our deputy chair and the chair of the social media committee. Carrie, would you stand up?
Hi, Chair.
So tonight we're thankful to have Sue Jeffers as our moderator.
Yeah.
She's a citizen activist, a cheerleader and tireless fighter for small government, for freedom and liberty. She's a business consultant that helps small businesses navigate their way through probably an anti-business environment that Minnesota has. And formerly, she hosted the Sue Jeffers Show on Twin Cities News Talk Radio for 12 years. But her greatest life accomplishment, she says, is raising her 3 amazing children. So please welcome Sue Jeffers.
I have enough questions. We could be here till next week. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Where's the representative? Were you over today? First day of the legislative session. It was crazy over there. Absolutely. Did you hear the protesters? The protesters, the ones that were screaming, what do you want? Driver's licenses now. Illegal aliens for driver's licenses. Right there. Screaming it, chanting and everything. Very first question I'm going to ask our candidates is a yes/no question, yes/no answer, and the question's going to be, do you think illegal aliens should have driver's licenses? So get ready, you two, get ready. There's just so much stuff happening over there. I saw the gun grabbers out in full force, orange t-shirts.
I even saw one DFL representative on the House floor with her mom's Plant Action shirt. So they're everywhere.
It's just unbelievable. And Joe was kidding when he said, have they raised taxes yet? Well, let me tell you, they got there's a supplemental budget bill over there already. Shocking. As if the billions of spending, it's just absolutely unbelievable. I give credit to Representative Steve Drazkowski. Steve Drazkowski, after the gavel dropped, he stood up and made a motion to adjourn. And it was voted down on a voice vote, of course. But thank you to Representative Drazkowski for trying, because they can do a lot of damage between now and May 18th. And because I live in a district where half of my district is a D plus 30, and the other half is like a 50-50, it's important to me to have the best candidates that we can possibly have. And I need to have people who are going to stand up and defend our rights, whether it's against driver's licenses for illegal aliens, whether it's against taxes and spending, whether it's against taking our guns. This is how serious this is. So the 2 candidates, I'm so excited to meet you guys. I'm so excited to have you. Come on up to the table. Come on up. Okay, Joe gave them 2 minutes to answer every question. I almost had a heart attack. So hopefully they're not going to take 2 minutes to answer every question, but some of the questions are hard, and they are going to have to take the whole 2 minutes. And we're going to be polite, and we're going to be nice, and you do get 2 minutes to describe who you can sit down for a minute. I'll try not to interrupt you. Joe said I had to read the debate rules before we started. So, number 1, the moderator will read the rules. Number 2, the event will end after 90 minutes. Number 3, each candidate will make a 2-minute opening statement and a 2-minute closing statement. Then they will have 2 minutes to answer the question. If the candidate references his or her opponent in a negative way, the moderator, that's me, will give the targeted opponent, the opportunity to respond for 30 seconds. The moderator is the sole source of the questions, but if you guys decide that I don't know how I missed anything, but I know I did. If there's something I mean, it's your district. If there's something in here that you feel like really needs to be, needs to have a question asked about or needs to be addressed, please write it down on a piece of paper and give it to me, and we'll go from there. Okay, so you each get 2 minutes, and then we're gonna go back and forth. And when you do your 2 minutes of who you are and why you're running and why we should vote for you and all of that, make sure you include in there if you have any skeletons in your closet. Because we don't want to read about it on the front page of the Star Tribune. We want to hear about it first, okay? All right, ladies first. Julia Coleman.
Thank you.
Tell us who you are.
Can you hear me? All right, good. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Julia Coleman. I'm a member of the Chanhassen City Council, wife to a Chanhassen firefighter, and most importantly, am the mother to a 4-month-old darling little boy named Adam. I'm gonna level with you. I was initially hesitant to get into this race at 9 months pregnant. Who wants to campaign when they can barely walk without waddling everywhere they go? But I saw that there was a tremendous need for a candidate who, yes, can fight for our conservative values, but can also connect with and communicate those values to the voters we need most in order to stop that blue circle over the Twin Cities from continuing to metastasize and engulfing Carver County whole. And I've proven I can do this. When I ran for city council, it would have made sense to run as a nonpartisan, in a race that's nonpartisan, in a seat that's turning purple and blue, but I ran outwardly as a Republican, and I still got more votes than almost anyone else on the ballot running for any level of government. That's because I know how to talk to women in the suburbs, millennials, growing families, to get them to listen to Republican ideas and get them excited to get out to the polls. And I'd like to do that again for Carver County if you'd give me the chance, doing my part to keep Carver County red for years to come. As your state senator, I want to fight for those families and show them how Republican ideas offer them the most opportunities to succeed. I want to use my experience growing the party to help get more people into our party so we don't fizzle out and die. And I want to use my experience in Minnesota's largest industry of health, innovation, and care to keep those critical job creators and jobs right here in Minnesota, so when the world looks at Minnesota, they come to us to solve healthcare's biggest problems in the free marketplace. I am so excited to be here to share my ideas with you tonight, and I can't wait to get this debate started. Thanks for being here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Funk. I'm the mayor of Victoria. I was born and raised in Carver County. Graduated Minnetonka Senior High School. Joined the service and spent 16 years in the Army intelligence field, serving in Korea and in Central America. After I retired from the service, I went and lived for a short time on the East Coast and started my professional career doing computer security and privacy, and I've done that ever since. I moved back here to Minnesota in 2003, and I've been here ever since. I ended up running for mayor after I led an effort along with a group of about 40 residents in Victoria in which we challenged the city council and ended the corruption, and we won the biggest open meeting law case in the history of the state. We've done a number of different things in going ahead and making change, making effective change. We went ahead and we have fixed, for the first time in 52 years, we actually got numerous different agencies together to do some maintenance work so that even though we had record rainfall in the last year, the neighborhood in Victoria of Zumber did not flood like it did in 14 because we got things done. We fixed Marsh Lake Road, and all throughout this process, we've been focused on doing what's right for the residents. Recently, the Vote No group with Eastern Carver County Schools asked me to get involved because they were having problems in the school district. I did get involved, and recently I wrote a letter that shows that what was actually going on, because I was invited to attend what is GEAR training. It's called actually the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. This is the stuff that's going in our communities. I've been fighting this stuff ever since I ran for mayor, and I want you to know that should I be selected as your next senator, the people that were pushing me to run and the people that are supporting me wanted me to take that same attitude of going after corruption and take that to the Senate to defend Carver County. Thank you very much.
Tom. Is it okay if I call you Tom?
Yep.
Do you want me to call you mayor?
No, Tom, please.
Okay, can I call you Julia? Do you want me to call you council member?
Anything but Julie.
Okay, we're gonna call him Tom and Julie. No, Tom and Julia. And just so you know, my sister's name is Julia, and it's a beautiful name, and I love that name. So I won't make the mistake again. She doesn't like Julie either. Okay, stand up. These are gonna be 2 yes or no questions. The first one is, should illegal aliens get driver's licenses?
Long answer, no.
No.
Very good. I knew we'd start off good. Okay, this one is a little longer question. You can stay standing, but it's also a yes or no answer. 2020 is a presidential election year, and presidential politics often takes center stage over local and state politics. Democrat presidential politicians are promising amnesty, open borders, gun control, minimum wage increases, paid leave, guaranteed free income, free housing, reparations, gay reparations, free college, free health care to illegal aliens, canceling student loan debt, free child care, universal preschool, new Green Deal, packing the Supreme Court, abolishing the Electoral College, and much, much more. Because presidential politics suck the air out of everything, will you embrace or distance yourself from President Trump? Julia.
Can I get more than a yes or no? I will be fully supporting President Trump, and I will be trying to get more young women in the suburbs out for him as well, because that's who he needs to turn Minnesota red.
Excellent. That's right, you cheer when they get good answers, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I actually have a Make Victoria Great Again hat, because that's exactly what we did. And for people that know me, I have been referred to on numerous occasions of the Trump of Carver County, but without a Twitter account.
Okay, now you can sit down. We're going to go back and forth, so whoever, is it your turn to go, Julia's turn to go next?
Tom's turn.
Tom's turn, okay, then you get to sit down and you get to stand up, but Julia, you have to listen because you're up next.
Does the music stop?
No. Well, I love that game. I'm still good at it. Okay, race baiting and name calling is a popular event from the left. I want you to listen to this. Representative, I want your attention. Put that phone down.
Posting a photo on Facebook about the thing today.
That's okay, you can do that, but I want you to listen to this. Because the left loves to name call, and I want these candidates to know how mean they're going to be. They're going to be vicious and mean and horrible, and you have to have thick skin. You have to be able to stand up to it. So, this is for you to listen to. Jamie Becker Finn, representative out of Shoreview, after President Trump's rally in Minneapolis, tweeted, "Sitting Republican members of the Minnesota House of Representatives joined forces with the white supremacists at the rally, attacking Congressman Ilhan Omar and our Somali friends and neighbors. A sad day for the Minnesota legislature." That's what the left gets away with. There's a different set of rules for the people on the right. Media, Hollywood, Democrats have all been allowed, almost unchallenged, to define and label what a Republican is. We've been called sexist, racist, homophobic, Islamophobic, Nazis, and many other derogatory names. Do you have the backbone to stand up to the hateful rhetoric, and how will you help change the perception and defend the Republican brand?
Good question. When I became mayor of Victoria, I already mentioned the lawsuit. There was a lot of controversy in Victoria. What a lot of people don't know is my first 2 years on the council, the same people that we sued and were found guilty in that open meeting law case were actually on the council with me. In addition to that, that was 2 of the council members. The 3rd council member was actually appointed by the 4 defendants to fill that. So when it comes to being attacked, I spent 2 years being attacked relentlessly, not only by the fellow council members, but also by the staff. When I got elected, the headlines in Victoria was, "This too shall pass." Later on, when I was exposing that these same defendants had put their personal legal fees on the consent agenda and then voted to approve that consent agenda, and I exposed that to the public. They then voted to censure and sanction me. And then literally it was an ambush meeting in which I was accused, tried, convicted, and executed all in one meeting. So fast forward to the letter I mentioned earlier related to Eastern Carver County District Schools. Once that letter was published, there were a bunch of different letters to the editor, and social media lit up. About 2 weeks after the letter was published, ROAR, Residents Organizing Against Racism in Chaska, actually put a post out there where my white supremacist roots have finally come to be shown. Bottom line is this, the only thing that surprised me about that is the fact that it took them 2 weeks to start accusing me of that. And the other thing that I'd like to point out, throughout this the entire time, I've learned to take all of those darts and just keep focused on mission. And I'd like to make one point about the letter that I wrote. All of the attacks and social media letters to the editors and everything else attacked me with false accusations and false assumptions, but nobody challenged what I wrote because what I wrote was the truth. Thank you very much.
On October 9th of 2019, my son and I almost lost our lives. And if the left thinks for 1 second that we can stare death in the face and watch him blink first, and I'll be scared of them, they've got another thing coming to them, I'll tell you that much right now. And as far as changing the perception, that's a big part of why I got into this race. Good luck painting a young professional millennial mother with the same brushstroke that you try to paint every other Republican in. I will fight that narrative tooth and nail, and I will get the next generation of voters to see that we as Republicans are so much more than what the liberal media is trying to paint us as. Thank you.
All right. Very good answers. Is Senator Jensen here? He's not. Darn. Because this question is for him. We thank Senator Jensen for his service. Please tell us, candidates, how you will be different or similar than Senator Jensen. Great question, isn't it?
Well, thank you for that question. I think it is important to note that Senator Jensen, I thank you for your service, but he and I know that we disagree vehemently on a number of issues, the Second Amendment being one of them. I fully support the Second Amendment. In fact, I see it as a women's issue when, at the end of the day, when my husband's at the fire station, the Second Amendment is one of the few means I have of truly protecting myself and my family. That's one issue that we disagree on. A way that will be similar is I think that he takes his time to think through issues, whether or not you agree with him on at the end of the day. He does take time to think. I think that's the main purpose of the Senate, is for them to take time and think and to, sort of disperse the passions of the people, really be thoughtful in their decision making, which I always am before I act. And I think another way that we might be different is I work in medical innovation. I believe in a lot of free market solutions to healthcare's biggest problems, and I want to see Minnesota being the one solving them. Thank you.
Senator Jensen is a nice guy, but I disagree with many of his votes. Second Amendment, single-payer health care, the fact that he made public appearances with Keith Ellison. The topic was prescription drug reform. Great topic. Love that he's on it. But there's two people I'll never have my picture taken with. One would be Keith Ellison. The other one would be Ilhan Omar. In addition to that, Senator Jensen, I believe, co-sponsored over 50 bills with Democrats in order to have a conversation. I agree we need to have a conversation, but you don't do it by co-sponsoring bills with the Democrats. Just recently we had, Victoria's unique in the sense that we have both House representatives representing portions of Victoria, along with Senator Jensen. We had all three legislators that recently spoke at a Victoria City Council meeting. We talked about a range of issues. One of the issues that is near and dear to me is the open meeting law. which for those that don't understand what it is, it's called the Sunshine Law. And it allows the public to hold elected officials accountable for their actions and puts consequences in place. In this meeting, Senator Jensen said it should be abolished, that the people that we had taken to court and had been found guilty made minor technical issues. Well, none of that's true. It's not what the judge said. And I was very much disheartened to hear Senator Jensen says because the legislature is exempted from the legislature itself is exempted from the open meeting law, that we should abolish the law. Folks, that law needs to be in place so that we, the public, can hold all of our elected officials accountable. And for any elected official to take the position opposite of that, I think is doing a disservice to the public that we serve. Thank you very much.
All right, let's see how well they do on some of the issues. We'll start with taxes. Minnesotans pay some of the highest taxes in the nation. According to the Tax Foundation's 2020 State Business Tax Climate Index, Minnesota finished number 45 overall. Minnesota is ranked number 44 for corporate taxes, number 46 for individual income taxes, number 28 for sales taxes, and number 26 for the property tax category. Are there any taxes you will work to decrease or increase?
Thank you. The 4 areas of taxes that I've been thinking about that I would like to see abolished would be the state income tax, but the reality is that's not going to happen until we stop spending everybody else's money. But maybe at some point in time that we'll be able to get there. More realistic, there's 3 things. I'm retired military, and my retirement pay for the military a few years ago was stopped as far as paying state taxes on that. I think we need to do the same thing for our seniors and Social Security. That shouldn't be taxed. Next, the estate tax. Thank you. Next is the estate tax. I believe an estate tax at some point we should have it, but I'm looking at, I haven't set where the number is, but I think if your estate is under a certain amount, 5 million, 10 million, again, I haven't fixed the number. I think if it's, since you pay taxes to build that estate, you shouldn't pay taxes on it again. But if your estate is wealthier than that, then maybe you can contribute a little bit more to our society. Next is the farmer's tax, what I'm referring to as the farmer's tax. I agree we need to protect our environment, and there are rules in place now where farmers have to take land out of production so that their fields, when they drain, that runoff is filtered to protect our waterways. I think that's a great concept, but when farmers are forced to take that land out of production, that affects their business. And if we're going to take that land when they can't make it produce, I think at the same time we shouldn't be able to tax it on. So I think those taxes also need to be removed. So those are the 4 areas I would look at, and I would try to push each one. Thank you very much.
You said something that kind of made me mad, and I just can't let it slide. He talked about buffers. There should be an outroar. Everybody should be running to the state capitol with their pitchforks over Dayton's buffer law. And that's where the government came in and took away a part of these farmers' lands, and they said it's going to save the planet or the stream or the land or the whatever it was. There should have been lawsuits over that. Yeah. That whole bill should, they took their property. They took their property. Property rights matter in the state of Minnesota. So rather than getting off their property, why do we have to pay their taxes for them? Is that what you just said?
No, I said they shouldn't have to pay those taxes.
Okay, but the county needs their money, and the state needs their money, so that means the rest of us are going to have to pay more money because the government took property they shouldn't have taken in the first place.
So let me be clear. I've said many times in Victoria City Council meetings that I will not support eminent domain unless there's no other choice. Right? The question was about taxes.
Yeah.
That law is already on the book where we've taken that land already, right, previously. What I'm saying is if that land has already been taken, then we shouldn't tax them on it also.
Then I want a tax break too.
Let's talk.
Okay, let's talk. Go ahead, Julia.
appreciate your fire and your passion, Sue. I miss hearing you on air.
Me too.
Agreed on the buffers. That was an issue that Alpha News, in fact, I at Alpha News was one of the only news organizations to give farmers that voice and that coverage. That's one of the reasons I helped start Alpha News, is because Republicans, it is time for us to have our voice in this state. As far as taxes go, I stood alone in Chanhassen as the only no vote for a tax increase. I know that each and every single time the government opens up your wallet to take out more money, that you as a family have to sit there and figure out how to figure out your bills. I didn't see that happening at the city level, so I voted no for that, and I have never voted for a tax. As far as taxes I'd like to see gone, definitely Social Security income tax. That is absolutely ridiculous, and Minnesota is one of the few states in the nation that still does that. Time to get away with that. On day one in the state senate, I will gladly put my name on a bill to get rid of that. And also the sick tax. That is something that we still have here in Minnesota. It is a tax on you every time you go to the doctor, every time you have a procedure done. We keep trying to get rid of it, and it keeps coming back. It is time to get rid of the sick tax once and for all. I could spend the next hour up here talking about how Minnesota is overtaxed, but you are taxpayers and you all know that. So thank you.
Very pleased with their answers, and they touched on some of the things that were going to be in the next question. One was on the Social Security taxing the Social Security benefits. The other one was on the death tax and the inheritance tax, or estate tax, or death tax, whatever you want to call it. This year that bumps up to $3 million. And that hurts small businesses and farmers so much, and I'm glad you guys are aware of that and you recognize that. The sick tax, talk about a scam. The sick tax was put in place in 1992 to pay for poor and needy Minnesotans who couldn't get health care. It was a good plan, it worked really well, till Obamacare came into place. Now Obamacare comes in, and I told the legislature, don't be stupid, don't pass this law. But you know what? They did. And they signed it, and they agreed to sunset the bill in 2019. And I'm like, 2019? Are you kidding me? So we still have to pay this 2% sick tax for like the next 10 years while they figure everything out. And then last year, we're going to talk about omnibus bills in a minute. Last year, when they all got together at the end of the legislative session and they made all those deals behind closed doors and they put the whole entire budget into giant omnibus bills, one of the trade-offs that the Republicans caved on was that sick tax, and they agreed to not let the sick tax sunset, but they dropped it to 1.8% instead of 2%. And every time you go to the chiropractor, the dentist, every time you go to the hospital, the doctor, it's $1 billion a year. And you know what they use it for now? It's a slush fund. It's a slush fund. You can't even find out where the money's going. Whew, write that down. Write that down. There's your next bill. How about some transparency and accountability for where that money is going from the sick tax? Oh, you guys are going to have your hands full over there. Okay. Omnibus bills. Hopefully everybody knows what an omnibus bill is. It's a garbage bill. They throw everything but the kitchen sink in there. And sadly, when the Republicans are in the majority and there's an omnibus bill, the Democrats say it's the worst thing in the world. And when the Democrats are in the majority and they have their omnibus bills, then the Republicans say it's the worst thing in the world. Unfortunately, it says right in the Minnesota Constitution, the single subject bill, right in the Minnesota Constitution. So that way we're supposed to be able to control what kind of bills we're passing. We're supposed to know what's in them. But they started making titles of these bills pages and pages and pages long. So you know what? We sued. We went to the Minnesota Supreme Court and we said, oh my gosh, look at this. This is not adhering to the Constitution. This is not the single subject rule. The bill is over a page long. And you know what the Supreme Court said? Close enough. They let us down. But that means it's up to the legislature, whether it's another bill to make sure that we stick to, yeah.
I love your passion, but can we hear more from the candidate?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got carried away. You're 100% right. 100% right. Question? and I'll take questions over here too. Okay, so the end of the legislative session last year was a disaster, and all the bills, all 14 budget bills went into omnibus bills. What are you going to do to stop them? Are you going to stick to the single subject rule? Are you going to help make sure legislation is passed that will make sure it sticks to the single subject rule?
That's a great question, and one of the things that I saw people really struggling with when I was covering the legislature with Alpha News is they drop these things on their desks with sometimes 20, 30 minutes to read it, and they have no time to go back to their constituents and say, what do you think about this bill? Do you like what's in it? Do you not like what's in it? Should I vote for it? Should I not? So to answer your first question, yes, I will be sponsoring legislation to try to get us back to that single subject. At the end of the day, you're only one state senator, but that does send a voice. Now, when it comes to the omnibus bills, I know there have been legislators that have tried to push forth legislation as well to say we need deadlines on these things. We need to go back to our constituents and talk to them about it. That is legislation I would support as well. I think we need at least a weekend to go talk to the people in our communities and get their thoughts on it. At the end of the day, we're supposed to be your voice. How can we do that if we can't even hear your voice because they're dropping this 1,000-page document on our desk at the final hour? I would push for that type of change. I would push that we go back to the single subject clause. I know that the Supreme Court is in disagreement with it, but like Sue said, at the end of the day, we as the legislators have to push back. Thank you.
So I was talking to a state rep after the last session, and one of the comments that he told me is he was giving about an hour to read a 300-page bill that came out of compromise. And it's impossible to read that and even know what is in it. It kind of reminds me of what happened when they passed Obamacare. We'll just pass it, you can read it later, right? I will tell you, this is near and dear to my heart in the sense of what I've had to deal with as mayor of Victoria. We get council packets on a Thursday afternoon for a Monday night meeting, and sometimes these packets with staff reports and attachments are 300 or 400 pages. Folks, it's impossible to read this stuff. And I have a group of people in Victoria that help me look at various pieces to try to get myself prepared for the meeting. So bottom line is the Constitution says we shouldn't be doing this. I would support any effort whatsoever to get to single subject bills. I also agree that even if you have a single subject bill, you need time to actually look at it. And there's examples we won't get into it here, maybe there'll be other questions later, but what looks at first to be good in legislation, you need time to think about it because it's the law of unintended consequences. If you pass something very quickly because you don't have time to sit and think about it a little bit, it may sound good when you pass it, but then you get the unintended consequences. So this legislation needs to be a deliberative process where you have time to review this, and any effort that moves us in that direction I will absolutely support. Thank you.
Okay, this year's a bonding bill. Minnesota's debt service is already $1 billion a year. Governor Walz proposed a $2.2 billion proposal. Cities, counties, colleges, every government entity lined up with their hand out for this free money. Totals over $5 billion already. The Democrats say they want, Democrats in the House say they want $3.5 billion. The Republicans in the Senate say they want less. Do you understand the difference between the state's wants and needs? Do you have an obligation to be fiscally responsible and to protect the people of Minnesota from irresponsible spending and borrowing?
Yeah, that's a good question. At the city council level, I think it's the same issue that I think is going on in the legislature. There's times where people don't realize what the impact is, and it's not their money, but they feel it is their money. I don't think that we should be borrowing money. I really think that we should be at zero-based budgeting, just like what we do personally in our own lives. We don't spend money that we don't have, and if you do, at some point it's going to catch up to you. We waste so much money in interest and bonds and other things that could be going to public works projects if we're not spending so much time borrowing money. And although it's not at the same scale, I've fought this within Victoria, and it's amazing to me that when you make reasonable, rational arguments, people say, well, we'll just go and bond for this or we'll bond for that. And it's like, folks, don't you understand that yeah, you can get what you want now, but long term, we're really setting up the next generations to pay a heck of a bill. And with the federal deficit the way it is, that's not at the state level, but it's the same concept. We need to stop spending money that we don't have, and we need to move towards zero-based budgeting. That starts first and foremost with what I've mentioned before. We need to stop spending the taxpayers' money. Thank you.
The first part of the question, do you understand the difference between a want and a need? Absolutely. Another new library at the University of Minnesota, that would be a want. Good roads and bridges, safe roads for us to drive on, that would definitely be a need. And Carver County needs a voice there, saying we need help with 212, 7, 5. We need to make sure that our district is taken care of. But as a state senator, you're also fighting for the rest of Minnesota, so you need to make sure we're being fiscally responsible, absolutely. I also think that if we're having a bonding year, why are we passing bonding bills during budget years? If we're going to have bonding bills every year, then maybe we could save the taxpayers some dollars and meet every other year if we're going to do it anyways. I support supporting bonding bills on bonding years, not during budget years as well, and making sure that we are being fiscally responsible and taking care of all of our needs first. Thank you.
Last fall, Governor Walz announced his Clean Car Initiative by executive order. It would require the auto industry to adhere to California standards in regard to emission gases, and it would require automakers in the state of Minnesota to sell a wider variety of electric cars. The state hopes to wrap up the rulemaking process later this year and have changes in place by December 2020. Do you have any thoughts on Governor Walz's executive order or how to rein him in, especially on his clean cars plan? And if you guys ever need me to repeat the question, holler.
Absolutely, thank you. I think Governor Walz, if he does run for a second term, is going to have a pretty big wake-up call. He said he was going to support all of Minnesota, and it seems like with the help of his lieutenant governor, is only supporting metropolitan liberals. I think that it's time that we start pushing back on this. I will do anything in my power to help rein in his executive authority if he's abusing it. And as far as the car issue, I believe in letting the free market speak. That's why you see a Prius everywhere that you go. You can't go down the highway without seeing these fuel-efficient vehicles. And we're going to make it more expensive for everyone down the road because as more people are using less gas or they're unable to buy the cars that they can afford. That affects all of us in our everyday lives. I think that we should let the free market answer this. The free market is becoming more environmentally friendly. Don't listen to the liberal media. America is one of the most environmentally countries that we have in this world. I think that we just have to let the market solve this. Thank you.
I agree, this is a free market issue. When you look at a lot of these clean energy initiatives that are out there, whether it's cars or producing electricity, these actually end up costing us more money for the recycle at the end of this, producing the various batteries, and when you actually look at the total cost and the total carbon footprint, these do not actually achieve what we're actually, what the executive order is intended to achieve, and that is a cleaner environment. So all of these kind of initiatives, whether it's that or the solar gardens, I don't support these unless there's a business model that sustains it and it's actually the most cost effective. And the way that we do that is through the free market system. The free market will decide, and to Julia's point, the free market is already going that direction. The more that we keep government out of it and let the free market work, the better it is for us as taxpayers and consumers. Thank you.
Democrats like to promise free college, and they like to promise student loan forgiveness. What role does the state government have in providing higher education funding or education?
I really think that our higher education has kind of lost focus. We as taxpayers are funding this, and what do we have on the higher education? First off, there's an undue focus on everybody having to go to college. There are a lot of other options that are available to people other than just going to a four-year college that ends up putting people $100,000 or $200,000 in debt with a degree that may or may not pay for themselves. I think when you look at the amount of money and that every year over year the tuition goes up, the salaries of the professors go up, but yet on the universities today we find that if you're a conservative and you try to speak out, it's fine, you have First Amendment rights as long as you agree with what they want you to say. But as soon as you disagree, all of a sudden, no, you can't do that, and then you have to have safe spaces. I really think our higher education is doing our society and the people that are in school a disservice. And one of the ways that we rein them back in is we need to look at that, any of that funding that we give them, and I would like to cut back on that dramatically. Furthermore, related to the colleges is when I like this idea of student athletes being able to be paid. Universities have made a lot of money off of these athletes. These athletes should be able to get that money themselves and pay for their schools. So I think this conceptually we need to get back to a free market system, and the higher education kind of has a monopoly on it. If we can get other options out there that are cost effective, when I went and got my degree I paid $20,000 for it. We need to get back to a system that allows people to be able to do that. Thank you.
The question, what role does the state have in paying for other people to go to college? Well, I think the answer is none. We shouldn't have a role in this. Why should a majority of Minnesotans who didn't go to college have to fund others to go have the opportunity they didn't have? Go pay for them to go to college when they had to either pay for it themselves or didn't go and made careers of their own or went to a trade school. I agree, yes, there is too much focus on four-year degrees. I think half of them end up being completely and utterly useless. More of our young people should be going into the trades. When you talk to people who are trying to build houses, they say, we can find 10 people to be a site manager, but we're on a waiting list for roofers, electricians, plumbers, you name it, framers. That's what we need to be solving. And through that, we can also give more young people jobs by directing them into the right directions. Not everyone needs a four-year degree. And so I think that the role, none.
Now we're going to talk about K through 12, E through 12, B through 12, whatever they're calling it nowadays. In Minnesota, the achievement gap, the gap in test scores and learning between white students and minority students is a very real and pressing problem. In Minneapolis and St. Paul especially, we have sentenced many children to a life on the sidelines, on the economy, and it is a shameful, unmitigated tragedy. White Minnesotans, 66.6% met the reading proficiency standards, 66.6%, compared to 34% for black students and 38% for Hispanic students. In math, 63% of the white students met the state standards compared to just over 26% of the black students and 31% of the Hispanic students. It's shameful, and it's been like this for decades. Do you have any suggestions for improving the educational outcomes of Minnesota students?
Thank you for the question. I think that Minnesota can do better than this. I think that Minnesota students deserve better than this. But the left's answer always is throw more money at it. And if that's what's going to get this done, then that's something to look at. But it hasn't gotten it done, and yet we keep throwing money at it. I want to see solutions. I want to see proven solutions to this before I continue just putting money into a problem and letting it just suck more money in and not help any students get out of this. I think it's time that we have our educational committees form, whether a special subcommittee or they make it their goal for a year to see what other states are doing, because I think there's 49 states doing better than we are at the achievement gap. Let's take a step back, study what they're doing, and then try to implement some of those policies here. I think that it is time for us to fix this issue because Minnesotans and our students deserve a lot better than this.
The answer is school choice. Let me give you some quick statistics. When you compare Eastern Carver County Schools to Minnetonka, Eastern Carver County Schools spends roughly $1,500 per year per student more than Minnetonka. They pay their teachers on average $8,000 less for their annual salaries. The results produced by Eastern Carver County Schools is in the low 60% range, but yet Minnetonka produces students with less money paying their teachers more, produces results in the low 80 percentile ranges. In addition to this, if you look at the statistics, we have last year 875 people left Eastern Carver County Schools and open enrolled into Minnetonka schools. That doesn't count those that went to home school or went to a private school. The answer here is free market concept. We need school choice. Without that competition, you're not going to be able to deliver the results, and we're letting our kids down, especially when we let these equity programs in that separate people and they try to achieve equal outcomes for everybody when you can't do that. We want equality. We want everybody to have equal opportunity. Then you have the comprehensive sex education in the schools. It doesn't belong in the schools. It belongs in the parent's choice, not a school choice. What's the right answer? I went and toured Hope Academy, the most disadvantaged social economic area of in South Minneapolis. These kids have every disadvantage imaginable, but they go to Hope Academy. They spend less than Eastern Carver County Schools, about $10,800 per year. They have kids that start algebra in 3rd grade. They start 4 years of Latin in 4th grade. They start 4 years of Spanish in 8th grade, and they start calculus in 12th grade. 98.5% graduation rate. It's not the kids, it's not the color of the skin. You've got to give them equal opportunity in the right environment. Hope Academy is the school choice. That's what we need to do. Thank you.
Planned Parenthood and the Minnesota Democrats are pushing comprehensive sex education. The curriculum is shocking and graphic. Disgusting images and normalizing language is used to teach 10-year-olds about anal sex, self-pleasure, and gender theories. It views the children as sexual from birth. Comprehensive sex education tells 4th graders that they can lose their virginity whenever they want. Images from some of the books in the program are so obscene that even when censored are not approved for the nightly news. I saw this book and it is shocking, and I am not surprised that it's not allowed to be seen on the TVs, because it is. So, and you touched on it a little bit, but my question to you guys is, what role should parents have in the public school system anyway? We try to stop stuff like this and we just can't stop it. So what is the role of the parents in these schools?
Great question. I recently put together a short video clip on comprehensive sex education, and we used actual material from the course in the video clip. We put it on Facebook, and guess what? Facebook blocked it for pornography. So this is real. We used exactly what they're going to use in the classrooms. This should not be happening. Schools are taking over parenting duties, and I think they need to be removed from that. They shouldn't have a choice. Where you look at equity surveys and other surveys that are going in these schools, and if you look specifically at Eastern Carver County Schools, and I've dug into this, you have the ability to opt out of these communications and block it, but it's all or nothing, which means you can't get any updates from weather, you can't get any updates about events at the school, you can't get any updates at all, or any communications from the school. We have to flip this whole model around, and what I do for professional living with computer security and privacy, we need to turn that model around so that by default people are opted out of this instead of opted in, and that the parents actually have to opt in for their children to be exposed to these kind of materials. So we need to put the control in the decision-making process back with the parents, take it away from the liberal educators who have their own agenda that they're trying to push. Thank you very much.
I think we can all agree that anything Planned Parenthood wants to push on our children is something that should be questioned, something that we should take pause on before we start putting it in all of their schools and all of their minds. I'm going to be putting my son into these schools in a couple of years. So if you want a senator with a vested stake, vote for this mama bear, because I will fight them tooth and nail on this content for him being exposed to this content. I said on day one from this campaign, I'm fighting to put power back into the hands of parents when it comes to their child's education. I firmly believe that the government closest to the people serves the people best. And I encourage everyone who has children or grandchildren in the school district to come to a school board meeting, to get involved, and to have a stake, because otherwise they're going to push stuff like this on our children, and I will fight to the death before I see that happen. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk guns. I love guns. I wish Representative Nash was here. We both shoot a 6-hour P229. And yeah, I love guns. I love the Second Amendment. Yeah, Senator Jensen made me mad with all that. So I wish he would have been here tonight. Thoughtful people understand that the Second Amendment isn't about guns. The Democrats are pushing horrible bills, in particular the red flag confiscation bill and universal registration, despite the fact that data shows there is no correlation between those bills and suicide or homicide reduction. Senator Curran has a constitutional carry bill. Senator Rude has a stand your ground bill. Senator Paul Anderson has a penalty that will has a bill that will increase the penalty for straw buyers. And Senator Pratt has a bill to ensure court-ordered firearm restrictions are executed. That doesn't sound right. I gotta read that bill. I don't know what that is. Anyway, Second Amendment. Will you protect it? Do you like any of these bills? Do you hate any of those bills? Will you fight for our Second Amendment?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely, I will fight for our Second Amendment. I will never support feel-good gun control measures that don't actually accomplish anything. That's what so many of the proposals that they put forth do. Yeah, they make us feel good, but when you actually look at the issues that got them angry and upset, show me an example where that gun control measure would have stopped that shooting from happening. I firmly believe that nothing stops a bad guy with a gun quite as well as a good guy with a gun. The Second Amendment is one of the most important amendments because it guarantees all the other ones. It guarantees our Fourth Amendment, our Fifth Amendment, our First Amendment. And as your state senator, when they propose these gun-grabbing measures, I'll have to give a defense for the Second Amendment. One of them being that the Supreme Court has already decided that we cannot go after the Second Amendment. In U.S. versus Heller, in McDonald versus Chicago, they proved that the Second Amendment is off limits. So I will support the Second Amendment, I will defend the Second Amendment, and I will make sure that they cannot take our guns and our rights away. Thank you.
Let me be clear. I won't support any new legislation that does anything to restrict any of our gun rights. Whether it's registration, universal registration, or red flag laws. What many people in this room may not realize is Minnesota actually already has a civil commitment law, and the gun violence is not a gun control issue or gun legislation issue, it's a mental health issue. The civil commitment law today exists, works, and can take care of issues where somebody has a mental health issue and that they could be a danger to themselves or others. So unequivocally, under no circumstances will I support any new legislation in anything regarding red flag law. Let me make one final comment about red flag law. Red flag laws like equity in the schools or other things, it's that law of unintended consequences. Let's say somebody designs a really good red flag law, it sounds great. The problem is with this, is if somebody tries to support that, they can never answer the one question, and that is, how do you protect the individual from all of the false accusations? And if you have a red flag law, you flip the defense of the Second Amendment from a group, which is where it should reside, to an individual, and an individual will never be able to stand up to the left when they try to come and take our guns. This is why the red flag law can never be supported, because they can never stop that false accusation process. Thank you very much.
Very good answers. A big hot topic this coming legislative session that I'm sure will carry over into the next session is criminal justice reform. Crime rates in Minneapolis and St. Paul are skyrocketing. Sentencing guidelines, felons voting, getting a warrant for police surveillance via drone, ensuing privacy for electronic communication, reining in excessive fees and fines are just some of the criminal justice reforms that have legislation over at the Capitol. Which criminal justice reform would you support or encourage or work for?
I'm not familiar with any of the bills being proposed, but I'll tell you what, anything that intrudes upon our privacy, I'm not going to support. Not unless it goes through a court system and gets a valid warrant that has valid probable cause. Some of this data that's out there today and some of the things that they're doing, these warrantless searches, we need to stop that. As far as other criminal justice reform issues, I think that we have to take a look, instead of locking people up for minor offenses, we have to look and make sure that we have something that fits the actual crime. So I'd be open to looking at minor offenses where it's nonviolent and there's nobody being hurt, that maybe we can do something. The other side of that coin is we have to stop the revolving door. For people that have gone out and have violent offenses, have hurt children, there should be no second chance for these people. We need to put these people in prison and keep them there. When you start looking at some of the rates, when you have cases involving minors, the statistics are not good. The number of people that actually serve jail time when the victim is a minor is low, and it depends on the county prosecutor, and the statistics based on the Center of American Experiment, they admit that there's some of this numbers may be skewed because it may be a sex trafficked victim that gets probation, so the numbers are a little bit less, but still it's an alarming trend that the people that are preying on children aren't locked away and kept out of harming others in the public. So there's a couple of points that I'd want to look at. The one final point, part of what I've done in computer security is I've run some forensics labs in which we've investigated computer cases that also involve child pornography. And I can tell you from seeing these pictures, it's something that you don't ever want to see, and anybody that's involved in that ought to be locked up and put away, and we should just throw that key away. Thank you.
I wholeheartedly agree. Our privacy is what makes America great. Our founders fought for this, and I will continue to fight for our privacy. Regarding criminal justice reform, I do support restorative justice for nonviolent offenders. I think we need to make more of an effort to get these people back into their communities so we can help lower the recidivism rate of people who are wanting to contribute to society, are wanting to be tax-paying citizens. And if they're just put out on the streets after they're let out of prison, they don't know how to use modern technology, they don't have anywhere to go, they don't even have a way to get to their parole officer's office in the morning. Are we setting them up for failure? Are we setting them up to be right back in jail for a nonviolent crime costing us taxpayers more money when at the end of the day they could be out contributing to society? That's the kind of criminal justice reform I want to look at, not taking your privacy away.
Two things. St. Paul Public Schools just finished a 5-year pilot program on restorative justice, and the results were inconclusive. 5 years, didn't work. They spent $5 million on it. But I agree with Julia. I think there's a lot of room for adults in restorative justice. I had one more point that I was going to make, and now I can't remember it, so we'll move on to healthcare. 66% of the Americans say near-crushing healthcare costs are the nation's #1 health policy challenge, and 56% cited universal insurance coverage, and they were talking about Obamacare, the skyrocketing costs, the lack of access, the bureaucracy, the privacy issues, and of course, government controls. Do you have any ideas for patient-centered and free market healthcare options? Will you fight for individual care and medical and genetic privacy rights?
My first one.
I think so.
Good, because I'm really excited about this question.
Because you work in this
I do.
field.
I work in for Medical Alley Association. We work with some of the largest and smallest companies. If you touch healthcare in this state, we work with you. We talk about these issues all the time, and in fact, this year we're taking on an initiative to figure out how to make healthcare more patient-focused, more patient-centered. There's a couple ideas that I really like supporting. That's introducing competitiveness. Let's talk about price transparency. Let's see if we can make it so you can shop around for your procedures. I think that will help lower costs so we can see where each person is going to give us the best bang for our buck and also the best quality of care. I also believe in, I believe it's Jim Hagedorn who's supporting this legislation of one pill, one price. America is subsidizing the rest of the world when it comes to our medications. I fully support the idea of if you're going to charge us a certain price, you're going to charge everyone else a certain price, because otherwise America is going to subsidize the rest of the world, and I don't believe in that at all. I think there's a lot of different ways that we can get these large health influencers and health companies in our state talking to each other and figuring out where's that lack of communication. Where can we work better together to make our healthcare more patient-focused? And I think the last part of your question was about patient privacy. I fully support that. That's part of the reason that I'm up here is I want to fight for patient privacy, patient rights, and making healthcare work for all of us. Thank you.
Let me take privacy first. That's actually what I do for a living. I deal with HIPAA and high-tech rule and EEOC and GINA and a number of other different regulations in the government side. Yes, we absolutely have to protect that data. For those that don't know, health records are actually worth more money on the black market when they get sold than financial records. It's just kind of what the black market is looking for. So we have to do a better job. I don't know if any of you have had it happen, but my information, partly because of what I do, has been attacked 6 different times. So my data has been exposed, not from the companies I work for, but by third parties that held my data. As far as the healthcare costs, there's a number of things that we need to do. We need to, like Governor Pawlenty did, I don't know, maybe it was a decade ago, we need to be able to open up other places where we can start competing and get lower drug costs. I personally would trust countries like Canada or Western Europe, right? And I think there's easy ways to verify that the medicines are right. I think we have to look at tort reform, right? Nobody would argue about somebody being compensated that is truly injured, but there's a lot of frivolous lawsuits that drive up the cost. I think we have to go after the insurance companies. They don't provide 1 ounce of care to anybody, but they add a huge amount of cost. Look at United Healthcare. I think President Trump and what he is doing in trying to open it up, for those that don't know, a lot of these insurance companies, they can't compete across the state lines. We need the free market. Anytime you introduce free market into just about anything, you get a better outcome that's much more cost effective. Price transparency. If people actually knew what they were paying, we would get an opportunity to make that consumer choice that would help us. The other thing is we've got, I've talked with people that work in ERs. Illegal aliens come in and get routine standard care all the time because they know they can go to an ER and get whatever they need. Well, guess what? Those costs, from talking to nurses and others that have worked in there, those costs are passed on to us and we're paying for that health care. Thank you.
Transit expansion promised it would get us out of our cars, ease congestion, and save the planet. Instead, it's an unmitigated disaster. Last week, 2 more people were shot on Metro Transit, and a legislative hearing, drivers testified about shootings, stabbings, rape, and robbery that plagued the light rail train lines. This past year, after realizing that the trains had evolved into mobile homeless shelters, Metro Transit decided to shut them down for a few hours in the middle of the night just to stop people from living on them. The latest plan proposes decriminalizing the act of not paying a fare to ride the trains instead of increasing police. Okay, you guys, are you going to be legislators trying to get me out of my car, or will you support additional transit funding? And for heaven's sakes, do you understand that the roads are for moving cars and commerce and emergency vehicles and public safety around our roads instead of bike paths and trains and all the other stuff?
Yeah, I don't support light rail. Let me share a little story. When I was living on the East Coast, while I was still serving before I retired, they brought the same concept in Baltimore. They brought a light rail down to a station called Cromwell Station in Glenbury, Maryland. There was a strip mall with 15 thriving small business owners there. It worked the same way as it does here. There was no police on it. It was an honor system to pay your fares. After that station, and that was the end of the station, and it came out of, the trains ran out of Baltimore. Within about 18 months, every one of those stores was closed, and it was because of loss through shoplifting. So I'm concerned that when the Southwest Rail, when it gets out here, whether or not we're going to be bringing problems with it, the answer is not to decriminalize jumping on the train. The answer is we have to police this stuff. If we don't do that, we're basically conceding to the criminals and the lawbreakers that, yeah, okay, we're going to let you run the show. That's never going to work. That's anarchy, and we've got to oppose that. The other thing, when we look at the cost effectiveness of rail, I know the engineer in Burlington Northern that runs the train from up by St. Cloud down into the cities. He told me that the cost for those fares is subsidized to the tune of roughly $50, and we, the taxpayers, are paying that for people riding that train because they can't. They could never get people to pay for the train that way. Same thing with the light rail. When you compare the cost of Southwest Transit or bus systems like that, bus systems that don't need rails and can go wherever they are needed and can expand wherever they need to go, that's the right answer. That's far, far more cost effective than these massive projects that, to me, are nothing more than corporate welfare for those that are connected. Thank you.
I agree with you, Sue. The light rail is a very dangerous thing. I once actually helped save a man off the light rail tracks with 2 trains coming in either direction, and he was just trying to walk across the tracks and was moving too slowly for the speed at which they were barreling through downtown. There is a time and place for mass transit like this. Minnesota is not in that time or that place yet. We don't have the population for it. Governor Walz needs to stop trying to pander to AOC and the Green New Deal and start trying to focus on drivers. Most Minnesotans still are drivers. I know my husband and I couldn't make our family schedule work without 2 cars in our household. Most Minnesotans are drivers. He needs to stop trying to get them out of our cars, start focusing on our infrastructure, our drivers, and our roads and bridges. At the end of the day, Governor Walz is a few Senate seats away from having full control, full DFL control over the state. That's why this race is so important. That's why every single person needs to get out and help the candidate that gets the endorsement at the end of the day. Thank you.
This is a good time for a yes/no question. Okay, you ready?
No.
Do you support, thank you, do you support Governor Walz's 20-cent tax increase on gasoline? He already answered it.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. That's just insanity. We're sitting on billions of dollars.
No, in case there's any question.
Thank you. Thank you. In November, President Trump signed an executive order which requires state and local government officials to provide affirmative consent in order to resettle refugees in their jurisdictions. He was attempting to give people a voice in what happens in their community. Beltrami County made national headlines when their commissioners voted no to refugee resettlement, making it the first county in the state and likely the country to expressly prohibit resettlement. So, write this down. Will you ask the hard questions? How many refugees do we get? Will we know in advance when they're coming? How will the refugees impact our city, our county, our school districts, and our workforce? What economic impacts will it have on our community? Will you stand up for the community so they're going to be the ones to get the information in advance to find out how additional refugees will impact their community?
Absolutely. America is a country of immigrants. That's part of what makes us so beautiful and makes me proud to be raising my son here. And I like that when there is a part of the world that is war-torn and people need help, that they look to America as their safe haven. But there is nothing wrong with asking your community, can you support this group of people? How is it going to affect your schools, your property taxes, your home rates? And the liberal media tries to paint us as racist or xenophobic if we don't want these people coming to our specific cities. I think that if your city wants to welcome these refugees, you can support them, and your city supports the idea of it. Good for you. That's a beautiful thing for you to do. But if you know that you can't handle it, that it's going to stretch the budget too thin, and at the end of the day it's going to be a bad situation for everybody, then I thank President Trump for giving our communities, our counties, our cities the right to decide for themselves, and I support him in his efforts. Thank you.
I was in a meeting recently with county staff, and in that meeting, this question came up. And my understanding is the county took no action, Carver County Board took no action, which by default means that Carver County is opted out. But as part of that conversation, the question did come up about the number of refugees. And the statistic we have is there's 16 that all came from the Ukraine that have settled in Carver County. But part of the problem with this whole process, if a county or jurisdiction says, yeah, we'll go ahead and take that, and I'm fine with that. Legal immigration, I don't have any problem with. But once those people land and they get the, I think it was $2,200 or $2,400, they can immediately move to wherever they want to go. So they may land in one spot, but then they can go wherever they want. And other communities may then have to absorb them. At the end of the day, I believe this country was founded by immigrants, and we've got all sorts of different events that we celebrate, that celebrate all sorts of places and peoples that come from all over the world. And in fact, in my first marriage, I married a Korean gal, and her family immigrated here, but they followed the rules and did it right. And one of her brothers took 10 years to emigrate, but they did it the right way. That's what makes this country strong, and we need to go ahead and bring and welcome those immigrants as long as they come in. And part of the requirement was they weren't going to be a burden to the taxpayer. They had to pay their own way. They had to make sure they stayed off of the state's rolls, and they actually did that. They all now live here. They've gained their citizenship, and they run productive businesses. And guess what? They haven't broken any laws either. Thank you very much.
What are your plans to help veterans in Minnesota with issues of suicide and homelessness?
I recently, a couple of months ago, met with Dan. Dan is a Carver County coordinator down at the county, in Chaska, down at the county headquarters, if you will. And he ran me through the programs that they have. I didn't need the services, but I wanted to learn what services were available to our vets. And I was pretty impressed with the program that they've got in place. I think we need to continue to do that, and President Trump has done so much to help our vets with not only all of the changes he's made at the VA, but these kind of local programs and the program that Dan runs, we need to continue to support those. Because these people, some of them, I served, but did not end up serving in a combat zone. But some of these guys and gals that have served in these combat zones come back, and they've seen some pretty traumatic things, and they've had some pretty significant issues. But they were there defending our freedom, because the price for freedom is eternal vigilance. And these men and women are the ones that are paying the ultimate price. So when they come back, we need to do everything possible to support them. And I'll support any legislation that does that. Thank you.
Before I wised up and moved further west to Carver County, I served as Miss Minneapolis with the Miss America organization. And for the entire year, I got to travel around the country talking about issues near and dear to my heart. Mental health and suicide prevention for our youth and our veterans was the issue that I chose to take up. I think it's so important that if you saw horrible things and you fought for our country, that when you come back, we should never turn our back on you, that you should get the mental health care that you need. I also support housing programs for our veterans. As a state senator, I will always happily do anything I can to make sure that if you fought for us, you served us, we're going to give that back to you in tenfold. One idea that I've always liked when we're talking about security in our schools, when the gun debate comes up, doesn't that sound like a great job for veterans? To protect our children, to make sure these people are trained, They know how to keep people safe. That sounds like a great job to give to vets. I support job programs for vets, housing for vets, and we should always make sure their mental health is taken care of, because I think something like 12 veterans commit suicide, is it an hour? It's something atrocious like that, and we need to start taking better care of them. Thank you.
Okay, and we only have about 5 minutes left. I still have questions on local control, the ERA, paid leave, global warming, voter fraud, but I think I'll go with this one. And then you can think about which other one you want me to do. Drag queens at story hour at libraries are a thing now. Can you believe it? Libraries, schools, bookstores, all over the place. They say that it captures the imagination and play of the gender fluidity of childhood and gives kids glamorous, positive, and unabashedly queer role models. Is this age appropriate? Do they belong in our schools? How can we put a stop to it?
I really appreciate this question because the transgender community is having their voice grow louder and louder. And I think regardless of whether you think that they truly are a man in a woman's body or vice versa, or someone with gender dysmorphia, we as people, as fellow human beings, need to be very careful how we speak about and to this group. There is a reason that they have a very high suicide rate. And while we may disagree with their lifestyle choices, they are a fellow human being. And we do need to handle this issue very delicately. Regarding having Drag Queen Story Hour, I don't think that's the best use of our funds for educating our students. Libraries have limited budgets, and I would like to see programs for getting students to read better. Perhaps have a historical figure stand up in their outfit and talk to them about their lives, read them a biography about their time in history. I think that's a better use, a better way to educate our children. I certainly wouldn't take my son to Drag Queen Story Hour. I think that he would have much more fun learning about George Washington, our founding fathers, reading programs. That's a better use of our dollars. Thanks.
Our Constitution was written to protect the rights of the individuals and not to protect the rights of the majority. I don't particularly agree with that lifestyle that they choose, but that's their choice. I think they have every right to do it. The part of the issue that I have with this is if they're going to choose that lifestyle, that's fine. But when we put it in our libraries, there's other kids and there's other people that get exposed to this that have no desire to see this. This gets back to this thing about like in the schools where there should be a choice. If they're going to do this in a library, it needs to be closed off so that the only people that get exposed to this are those that choose to get exposed to that, and it's not out there for 5-year-olds or others that happen to be in the library doing some other activity to have to get exposed to this. This constitutional issue I think is paramount in everything we do when we get into these issues of the movement. They get very militant if you don't agree with them. I don't agree with their lifestyles, but they have every right to do that. One of the ways when I look at this issue is I don't want them telling me how I can live my life. I don't have the right to tell them how to live their life. That said, they have no right to expose that to people that want nothing to do with that lifestyle. We need to put controls in place so that they can practice what they want without exposing it to those that don't want to have celebrate or participate in that lifestyle. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to cram a whole bunch of stuff into this one, but basically we're talking about voter fraud. Nobody likes to talk about voter fraud in Minnesota, well, except for me. I do a lot. Can anyone explain to me why we have more ballots than registered voters in some areas? In 2008, Mark Ritchie told me there were over 250,000 more ballots than registered voters up in CD8. He told me in 2010 there were even more. How about the convicted felons who vote? How about the guy who vouched for the woman who lived in St. Louis Park but came into Minneapolis to vote? For Ilhan Omar, I might add. Did anyone press charges against him for vouching for people who didn't live in the district? Does anyone believe they're the only two? How about, Ramsey County? I live in Ramsey County. Maplewood, St. Paul, and Roseville, the vote totals in the middle of the election night counting them, they just flip-flopped. They just flip-flopped. No one can explain it. No one explains to me why Jim Nash and I have had a long conversation about this, about the software companies being inside while the votes are being tabulated. That's Ramsey County, of course, but still, it happens. It happens everywhere. The Office of the Legislative Auditor revealed more than 26,000 voters whose status was marked and challenged in November of 2016. Guess what's been done about that? Nothing. Nothing. We've had legislators specifically ask Steve Simon for details. What have we heard? Nothing. During 2018, 15,000 individuals registered to vote using the last 4 digits of their social security number, and they couldn't be found. We have a lawsuit on that. So, 47 other states have what Minnesota does not have, provisional ballots. Would you support provisional ballots? Would you support voter ID? Are there any other election reforms you'd like to see in place?
Oh, boy.
Do you want to leave the question?
No. So I was raised in a Republican household, and not because we were just blind followers, but we believe in the principles and the foundations of the Republican Party. And I was really disappointed when my dad passed away in '96. Ever since, he's been voting a straight blue ticket. So, I think there's issues. And of course, yes, I was kidding about my dad. I believe that to buy a pack of cigarettes, to buy a rifle, to join the Army, to buy a drink, to get on an airplane, you need to show ID. The most important thing we do as citizens of this great republic is go and vote. You have to be able to show that, in my opinion, you have to be able to show a valid ID, that you live in the district and that you can vote in the district. All of the arguments that I hear that when Republicans ask for voter ID, that we're trying to suppress the vote, I think are just spin. There is no truth to it. So I do believe that we need to do this. And as far as voter reform, I believe that the sanctity of the ballot box should be maintained so that if you go in and vote, that data shouldn't be given to any of the political parties. People should have the right to vote however they want and not be worried about having that data exposed to one party or the other. I also believe that when you talk about voter reform, the referendum in Eastern Carver County Schools, all of these absentee ballots that are gathered, this is a sample of, or an example of the types of problems that we have to look at and fix, but all of those ballots were actually collected and kept in the superintendent's office. Now think about that. So they want the referendum, but yes, they're keeping all of those ballots. That to me is just astounding. Plus, when we start looking at the election judges and the fact that the rules are not being followed and Republicans are not allowed to act as election judges, just tells me that it's just ripe with fraud. The final point, Steve Simon not turning over the data raises serious concerns in my mind. Thank you.
I'm blanking on his name, but there was once a Republican United States Senator who lost by about 300 votes, only to find out 1,800 felons voted in his election. Can't quite come to me right now. To answer the question, yes, I do support provisional ballots so that we can verify who you are before we count your vote if you have been vouched for or don't have an ID. However, I do support voter ID. I think that's incredibly important. Minnesota is a paper ballot state. I support Minnesota staying a paper ballot state. That is hacker-proof, and I think that's incredibly important. I know that there's also efforts that are constantly introduced to make it so that we don't have to have election judges on either side of the aisle. I would fight against those. It is incredibly important that we have election judges from each side of the aisle to make sure that our election integrity remains intact. So I do support that some election reform. I support reform for the vouching system. We need to make sure that we are getting the right people into office, and Minnesota is so close to being able to flip red again that every single vote is going to count. Thank you.
Questions. We could stay for another 5 hours, but that's it. So we're gonna give each of the candidates, is it 1 minute or 2 minutes, Joe? Whatever, you guys tell us why we should vote for you, and then I'll wrap things up as soon as you're done.
So, when people ask me why I think that they should vote for you, I'm going to leave you.
3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes, okay.
No!
I'd like to leave you with an important thought. I've got a proven track record of challenging the system where it needs to be challenged, whether it's the Met Council, the League of Minnesota Cities, whether it was the corruption in Victoria and putting an end to that, or speaking out on issues like equity in our school district. I'm not afraid to ask that hard question. And the reason is I don't consider myself a politician. Yes, I am an elected official, I'm not a politician. And what's the difference? A politician will look at an issue and say, what's the politically correct thing to do? I'll look at an issue and say, what's the right thing to do? And what is the right thing? It's based on the values that I learned growing up in my time serving in the military. When I went overseas, I saw things that I just wish so many people here that have never actually been outside of the country could see. Open running sewers, electricity that is maybe on half the time. We take so much for granted in this country that we forget sometimes just how great the country is. And I think we have to be reminded of that. And so part of all of this, I really think, is those values that I learned there and the values I learned growing up in Carver County. I'll tell you one real quick short story. When I was 5, 6, 7 years old, something like that, I stole a bunch of erasers from a bacon drug, for those of you that remember the bacon drugs here. Went home, was playing with them. My dad saw that. It was a friend of mine and my older brother. All three of us did it. He marched us back to the store, made us put everything back, took us up there in front of the store manager, and when I look back on it, I think it was all set up. He goes, well, do we call the police and have them arrested? The manager says, no, maybe not. The reason I tell that story is because it taught me about responsibility and accountability, the same thing I learned in the military. So I will make and always do the right thing, regardless of the political consequences. And that's why I'm hoping to earn your vote and go and take that same attitude into the state senate to represent Carver County. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here tonight and for listening to us. I hope you had a good opportunity to learn about each of us, our views for the future, and I think see that we're similar in a lot of our principles. But let me tell you where we're different. I ran as a Republican in a purple city that is fading to blue. And as a young millennial Republican, I still got more votes than Jeff Johnson and Tim Walz, than Eric Paulson and Dean Phillips, than anyone running for the state house, the mayor's seat, or for city council. The fact is, I am a proven winner, and we need a proven winner. I'm also a proven conservative. I fought against taxes in Chanhassen. I was the deciding vote on giving our citizens and our businesses a voice in our city hall. But that's just my resume, and it's not about me. It's about the future of Minnesota. It's about the Senate being the last firewall we have against total DFL control in this state. It is about our party's future. It is about all of you. So let me tell you what I'll do for your state senator. I will continue fighting against tax increases. I will continue fighting for our Republican values. I will fight for the sanctity of life, for our amendments and our rights. I will fight to grow our party. I will fight to be your voice, your representative, your fighter. And if you believe in me, I hope that you will come fight for me, that you will come out on caucus night and at the endorsing convention and say, I believe in Julia and her vision for the Republican Party, Carver County, and Minnesota. I'm going to send her to the state legislature so that she can fight for all of us. And I'm so excited for the chance to do so. Thank you all for coming, and if I haven't gotten a chance to connect with you yet, I look forward to doing so after tonight. Thank you.
Wow, what a great evening. So I really want to thank Joe, I want to thank Carrie, I want to thank all the volunteers of the Carver County. You guys did an amazing job setting this up. Thank you to all the people who came, who took time out of your night, who cared so much about making sure that you elected the right person to represent your district. Thanks to all of you, too. But most importantly, thanks to two great candidates. Give them a really big round of applause.
Thanks again for everyone that came out tonight, appreciate it.
Wait, you only have 2 minutes.
I also want to thank our security service that was here tonight and the Carver County Sheriff's Department that did a couple drive-bys while we were in here, so thanks to them.